Now, Senator Tim Kaine, Democrat of Virginia. He sits on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee as well as the Senate Armed Services Committee, and he joins me now. Senator, thank you so much for being with me tonight. And I just wanted to start, and I really want to dig into what can happen to end this war, but I want to start with this new reporting out today about the concerns in the White House about Iran striking military targets inside Israel. Is that something you've been briefed on, and are you concerned as well about that threat?
Jen, I'm very concerned about it. We're in the end of a 2-week Easter recess, and I haven't had classified briefings since this alert was posted. However, as soon as Israel struck Iranian officials in Damascus, we knew the likelihood that Iran would respond. That's just what happens. And I'm sure the Israeli military also expected there would be retaliation if they did that. This is a dangerous moment where we don't need more escalation. We're already seeing not only a war in Gaza, but Hezbollah attacks into Israel from the north, Iranian militias in Iraq and Syria taking action against Israel and U.S. positions, the Houthis firing missiles into the Red Sea. The last thing we need is an escalation between Iran and Israel right now, and that puts the onus back on all of us to work together to find a hostage deal that would release hostages in exchange for a ceasefire. We could flood the zone with humanitarian aid into Gaza safely, and we would open up space for a discussion about an extended ceasefire, but also about what would the future be for Palestine. That we'll be back where we are right now if we don't meaningfully engage instead of just paying lip service to the notion that Palestinians have a right to an autonomous future. What exactly that looks like, it'll be different than what was contemplated in 1948, but it's been a discussion that has been long delayed that needs to happen, but we can only get there if we get into a ceasefire and a hostage release deal.
Senator, you've called for kind of only providing defensive weapons, not offensive weapons. Help us understand what the difference is. What weapons would you not be comfortable providing that we've been providing in the past to Israel?
I think more offensive weapons that have the possibility of killing civilians and humanitarian aid workers right now is just pouring gasoline on a fire that's already raging out of control. Israel needs to defend itself against those who would annihilate it, and the U.S. has always been a partner in that. That includes Hamas, that includes Hezbollah, that includes Iran. Systems that we have worked with Israel on in the past, like the Iron Dome system, which intercepts missiles and rockets fired at Israel, those are the kinds of things that we should be continuing to provide. I voted for defense aid to Israel in a supplemental package that passed in February. We're still waiting for the House to take it up. It also included humanitarian aid into Gaza. So I think there's plenty we can do that will make sure that Israel can defend itself against threats, including this serious threat from Iran. But I think more offensive weapons into this theater of war right now is only going to lead to more and more bad outcomes, not the de-escalation that we need to see.
So let me ask you about the pacing, because this is one of the difficult decision-making topics, I think, if you're a senator on the committees you're on, if you're sitting in the White House. I mean, there could be an approach here, and I outlined this a little bit at the top of the show, where there's threats, they wait to see if there's progress, maybe they cut off individual weapon systems, as you remember the Obama administration did with Saudi Arabia in 2016. There's obviously calls to do more, cut off F-16s by Senator Warren. What is the pacing of this that you're comfortable with?
You know, Jen, actually, I think the pacing issue that's the most crucial issue right now is to see Israel dramatically increase the allowance of humanitarian aid into Gaza. This is a war against Hamas. It shouldn't be seen as a war against Palestinians or a war against Gazans, but the allowance of this humanitarian crisis to spiral out of control with starvation and famine and medical emergencies, that is what is creating such an escalatory pressure in the region. And Israel has an obligation, pursuant to a Biden administration security memorandum, as a recipient of U.S. security aid, to do what every other recipient must do, and that's cooperate with U.S. humanitarian efforts. The strike on the World Central Kitchen aid workers this week, which is not only tragic in that it killed aid workers, but ultimately tragic because it's blocking aid from getting to suffering Palestinians, and it's making other NGOs that are providing humanitarian aid potentially step back from their necessary work. Even the U.S., which is building a marine pier in the Eastern Mediterranean to help get humanitarian aid into Gaza, that operation is threatened by what happened this week. The pacing issue that's the most important issue right now is for Israel not to fight until the very last minute and then eventually agree to open a new border crossing that should have been opened weeks or months ago. We need to see robust delivery of humanitarian aid safely to a civilian population that's suffering during this war and suffering under the thumb of Hamas. That's the pacing issue that I think is the most urgent right now.
Yeah, I'm asking because of exactly that. What is the leverage to ensure they will do that, right? So there's threats right now. At what point do you think, is it if they don't provide additional humanitarian assistance more expansively, that you think there should be additional weapons systems cut off?
I think these things all fit in together. I don't know that there's a, if A, then B. I don't think this is a math problem. This is a problem of human tragedy at a significant scale. The Hamas attack on Israel was horrific. The reason for the attack and the timing of the attack was partially to disrupt U.S.-Israel-Saudi normalization discussions that included a discussion about a future for Palestine. Hamas doesn't want a Palestine and Israel living side by side. So it's a very hard problem to solve to enable Israel to defend itself against those who are intent on its destruction, but protect all these innocent civilians who aren't part of Hamas, who are under the thumb of Hamas and don't deserve to suffer. So it's not a simple mathematical equation. I do think the president was firm in the conversation with the prime minister yesterday. The prime minister and his war cabinet scrambled and then said, okay, we'll open up the Erez crossing again. Way too late. This should have been done a long time ago. But with the opening of Kerem Shalom in December, with the agreement yesterday to expand humanitarian shipments into southern Gaza through Kerem Shalom, with the new opening of this border crossing, what we need to see is a dramatically increased pace of humanitarian aid to suffering Gazans, and to see that it can be done safely. What NGO is going to feel safe doing it after watching what happened to the World Central Kitchen staffers this week? And again, even this U.S. military operation, these are some troops that are deployed out of Virginia, Fort Eustis in Virginia, in charge of this Marine Pier operation. We knew when we announced it they might be in harm's way from Hamas, but after the events of this week, anybody doing humanitarian aid is going to wonder if they're in harm's way from the IDF. And so we've got to see a dramatic uptick in Israel allowing humanitarian aid to suffering people. And we come back on the Senate next week. We have a hearing with the Secretary of Defense and the Armed Services Committee, with the USAID Director and the Foreign Relations Committee. This topic is going to dominate Congress as soon as we get back on Monday.
Senator Tim Kaine, thank you. With all of your experience, it's so helpful to dig into a very difficult issue. Appreciate your time tonight. I'm going to get you some tea with honey as well to help you with your voice. Thank